This is a Fleet Success Show, dedicated to helping you and your fleet succeed using the experience of fleet professionals and Hall of Fame fleet legends. The show that explores how the pillars of stakeholder satisfaction, intentional culture, resource efficiency, and risk management all combine to lead your fleet to success. We're glad you're here. Now, let's get into the show.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Fleet Success Show. I am Marc Canton, your host, and I am joined by my good buddy and now
Fleet Success Manager, Drew Morrow.
Very nice. How you doing, Drew?
Dude, I'm doing good. Long week of kind of onboarding, but super excited to be, as I've told everybody, drafted to the NFL. This is a bunch of superstars around here, and now I'm ready to help make a difference.
Let's kind of bring people back and do the whole gambit. So you're a Fleet Success Manager now. What does that mean to the world?
I do what the mission of the company is. I help fleets succeed. So I'm going to be working with a bunch of different fleets, and we're going to be making sure that they take their data and turn it into actionable events. I'm very excited about it.
How did you get into fleet? Did you wake up one morning and say, Mommy and Daddy, I'd like to be a fleet manager when I grow up? Or talk to me. How did it happen? Bring me back.
Of course. That's what everybody does, right? This fleet manager thing, it's so great. No, I think it's a very unique story, and I do like to tell it because it goes back to the 8th grade. The town where I live, you either went down the traditional high school way or you veered off and you went to vocational schools. Now, when I went to school, vocational school was for the kids that, we'll just call them troublemakers. We'll say that, right? But now there's a whole admission process. This year, they just implemented, it's not subjective scale scoring from the school. Now they have metrics from the Department of Education. So it's really hard to get into this school now. But my English teacher sat us down kind of close to the end of the school year and was just chatting it up when you don't have anything to do. And he was like, hey, where do you plan on going to high school? And I was like, I'm going to go to Shawsheen Tech and I'm going to be a carpenter. And he looked at me and he said, do you know where we live? And I thought about it. I'm like, yeah, dude, I would come to school here. Of course I know where we live. He said, no, 6 to 8 months out of the year, it's cold and it has terrible weather conditions. What do you want to work outside at forever for? And I was like, this guy's got something. So go to Shawsheen Tech. They have an exploratory program and got into the diesel shop. It was the largest shop of square footage in the whole school, and everything in there belched big bellows of black smoke. And I was like, okay, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life.
Greenies, ignore him.
But then I went to my first job. I came out here. I went to UTI. That's how I kind of got introduced to Phoenix in the great weather that they have here, where pretty much your sneakers melt to the streets in July. So that wasn't good. But I got back to Massachusetts and started working at a dealership. And during the interview process, the shop foreman asked me, he said, hey, what do you want to do in 5 years? And I told him, I said, I want your job. So now that translates into not necessarily being a shop foreman, but I knew that I did not want to turn wrenches for the rest of my life. And that's what got me progressively thinking about, okay, what steps do I need to put in place to run some type of shop, fleet, whatever. And then when I got introduced to fleet, I thought the greatest thing about it was being a technician at that point, you see the same vehicles come back over and over again. So it's not like when you're working in an aftermarket shop where a vehicle comes in after somebody's bastardized the whole thing and you're like, wow, I have to put this all back together. So you build a relationship with the vehicles. And then that in turn helped me build a relationship with the stakeholders, right? So now at a fleet, they had a couple of times I ran small fleets. So there was only 1 or 2 technicians and they said, well, what do you really manage? And I'm like, what do you mean, what do I manage? I have 70 vehicles. I manage all of them. They all have personalities. Some days they come in and they're having a bad day at work. They put the engine light on. They don't want the door to open. I mean, so it's a different, managing tactic, but, it's great. And that's, my fleet story. And obviously in the past 5 years, connecting with, RTA and really understanding and connecting with gentlemen like you and Steve and understanding how to process the data and really making data-driven decisions is, where I've really begin to admire and enjoy fleet leadership.
So that's actually a really cool insight you just shared that, I'm very aware of, but I don't think we've ever really talked about it on the show. You said you begin to have a relationship with the vehicle in a fleet setting, and that's so true. Where I hear that the most, or where I feel like it's the most profound, is in the school bus world, where man, these mechanics, they know these buses inside and out. They take such great pride. And in fact, sometimes you'll even see assignment be based on buses, meaning the mechanic will own that bus for its entire life. You probably have some similarity to that in your world. You've been wrenching and then managing as well, ambulances for some time now as well. And I'm sure that in your shop, there's probably a very similar feel.
I think the interesting thing about the ambulance industry is we become very proud of the body manufacturer that we become partners with. So when somebody says, I use Braun or I use AEV or I use Lifeline, you then begin to pick apart that brand that they use. So there's a couple of really, upper echelon, or people say they are, I'm not really sure they are, ambulance manufacturers. And we always worked on AEV. And I said, so your company is paying $40,000 or $50,000 more than this product that we're working on. What makes it better? Show me. Let's open it up. Give me the insight on why you think this is better other than it costs more or because your department bought it. So you become very brand loyal, which is cool.
Well, in my opinion, not only ambulance folks, but all of the emergency services folks, you guys are all sort of, you really love your operators do their bells and whistles, man. It's all about the lights and the sirens and the horns, and my lights are better than yours, and they go higher and they're brighter, and I got more colors, or I don't know what it is you guys fight about, but seems like it's a constant.
We get into a lot of deep conversations at the ambulance manufacturer since COVID because they had a hard time bringing more, resources and, people in to build the vehicles. And we started to talk about how can you make the ambulance specification process more like the OE automobiles. Hey, listen, you have package A, B, and C, and this is all you're getting. Right, exactly. Standardize it. So that way, when you bring a new builder or somebody that's working on the manufacturing floor, they only need to know how to build product A, B, and C, not the wide gamut of options that they give
ridiculous.
everybody. Yeah.
Everywhere you go, they have basically their own custom setup. It's really amazing.
Yeah.
On our internal chats, you guys, believe it or not, but we really are fleet geeks, and we do Teams chats, we'll Slack, we'll do other things like that, and we will get into debates. Usually it's triggered by product. Sometimes it's triggered by sales or marketing.
Sometimes by a question from the customer too. That was a couple of the ones I've seen so far in the fleet success thread.
Yeah, exactly. So someone will ask and then, we'll comment, and usually we agree because best practices are best practices. But once in a while, something gets thrown in where we don't totally agree, or maybe we do, but we don't realize it until we get some clarity. And then whenever that happens, I say, I want to bring some of the guys and gals that we have as SMEs on the podcast and talk about that topic. So you were the first guy I got my hands on, and you're going to be the first to comment. I'm sure everyone else is going to watch and listen and have thoughts. I'll try to get as many of them on as I can. The ask was kind of vague or general, and I think people sometimes put meaning where maybe there's not. But the question is, should there be an inspection after, or as a line, essentially, on every work order, every time that asset or vehicle comes into the shop?
Talking this through makes me kind of be on the fence, right? Because when we talk about a lot of the processes that we go through and how to make fleets better, it's all about documentation. And the way that I would perform a walk around of a vehicle as a technician, once you get the work order, is I like to kind of teach people is, hey, don't walk around with blinders on. So you go and you get a ticket for a vehicle with the headlight out. Well, now you walk around the vehicle and all of a sudden it's missing lug nuts on the left front wheel. Are you just going to do one of these things and not look at the lug nuts because all you were told to is do, the headlight? The interesting part about it is what level of inspection are we talking about? And is this almost like a DOT pre-delivery inspection?
Nope.
I don't know. There's so many aspects to go around it. I think the one thing that you got to struggle with is how much time does it take and how much time are you going to allot to this inspection? And whom is doing the inspection? Is it a service writer inspection or is the technician doing the inspection?
So this got dropped in the chat, and a lot of people said, no, you don't need an inspection after every work order.
See, and that's where now you've flip-flopped on that. Is this something that happens before, at the beginning of the work order process, or at the end? Because now it's two different types of inspections.
This was the simple question. This is what happens when, I don't mean any offense, but when like sales or marketing people ask a simple question in a chat room that's filled with fleet SMEs, right? So the knee-jerk reaction was, no, you don't need it on every work order. Who said that? And of course, I'm watching this chat go back and forth and everyone's agreeing. And I kind of lost my you-know-what. I was like, are you guys effing kidding me? Of course you need an inspection after every work order. And we kind of went, back and forth on it. And actually, I think we actually settled on something, but that's kind of why I wanted to go through it, because I think a lot of guys and gals on this, they had in their head like a PM inspection, kind of a thing, which...
What does it take to build a fleet you're proud to lead? At RTA Connect 2026, you'll learn directly from former fleet leaders, technicians, and industry experts who are solving the same challenges you face every day. Spend 4 days in Chicago, getting hands-on with RTA Fleet 360, exploring AI-powered fleet strategies, learning how top-performing fleets make smarter decisions, and so much more. Connect with hundreds of fleet professionals who understand the pressure of keeping critical services running safely and reliably. Join us October 12th through 16th at the Hyatt Regency O'Hare in Chicago for RTA Connect 2026. Visit rtafleet.com/connect to register today, because this year we will sell out.
Do you need the full 191-point inspection? I would say we probably need it more often than maybe others think they do. But if you had it in for the PMA 2 weeks ago, and now it got brought in because, a light bulb went out, you probably don't need the full PM inspection. I get that. That was one of the arguments made back at me. And I said, okay, but I still want an inspection. And here's my perspective on it, right? For the background, I think most of the audience knows, but I use a network of outsourced vendors. And we had a small engine shop, but really that's what we did. And I challenged folks. I said, well, think about what you would want if you were outsourcing it. If you went to a vendor, if I got something back from a vendor and I didn't get an inspection sheet back, I lost it on that vendor. Now, I had the advantage of being in New York, where I had another service person I could go to every 3 minutes,
Right.
and leverage that to people. Like, what are you kidding me? He's going to do that for me. If you don't want to do it, fine. You don't get my business. But normally it would come back. I wouldn't get the inspection, and I'd call and flip out and say, where's my inspection? It's supposed to be included, right? Because for me as the manager, I want to know that it was checked. This is part of how I'm doing risk management. I'm moving people. You're moving people in your world. I'm moving people, and I need to know that that vehicle is in great shape and that someone looked. I've had wheels fall off on the Cross Bronx Expressway and the West Side. I've literally had wheels fall off my vehicles on the highway. Like, how the heck does that happen? Someone failed, right? But how can I prove that it wasn't us who failed if I don't have an inspection showing that lug was checked? So it's funny to me that you brought up the lug, because that was actually one of the scenarios I was thinking of. And it's happened more than once, unfortunately, right? So what's going on with that? So that was kind of my frame of reference. I see you have a thought. Go for it. Shoot.
So really, when it comes down to it, it's the fleet leader's responsibility to now set this expectation, right? And you're, grandstand about SLAs all the time. So you're talking about inspection reports not coming back. Did you have clearly documented SLAs with these vendors?
That's a great point. And I'll tell you, when I first started, no, I didn't. And very quickly I did. And again, I had the ability to not have to wait a year and bid and all that, because I had the ability to just go out and say, well, if you won't do it, the guy next to you will. Right.
Yeah.
And so I was able to get that done, very, very quickly. Again, thankfully, we did do documenting on those examples I gave you where we had wheels fall off. But can you imagine if I didn't? But the point is, in that context, right? Like, if I think when we think about great customer service, when we think about stakeholder satisfaction, right? When our operators and our drivers and our departments bring in that vehicle in an in-house shop, I think the same standard applies, right? I'm expecting to walk out of it believing everything's great. Like, the most common story you hear from operators, I just came out the shop and already I have this problem. And then the mechanic will say, well, we were looking at the brakes, not the windshield wipers. So what? Look at the wipers. It's here. Now's the time to look. So while I understand the PM argument that it just had the PM, on the same token, like, I think you got to look. Now, does it need to be necessarily the 191-point inspection? No,
definitely not.
It doesn't. But it's also not just like the quality, like you mentioned when we were talking, before the recording. Well, if you get something back from sublet, you should always do a QA, QC. Absolutely, right? And that's really focused on the work that was done. And I would argue you integrate into that, a legitimate inspection. Now, what does that inspection look like? It can depend on your assets, on your utilization. I'm not saying it needs to be that PMA, but it needs to be something. And my intuition is it needs to be more substantive than what you're asking your drivers to do in their pre and their posts, or if you have DVI required vehicles. Like, it has to be something more than what the driver's doing. At least there's got to be an eyeball on those brakes. Like, just give me an eyeball on them. I'm not saying you got to put them on the lift and measure, but, you know, like, are you looking at the tires? Are you looking at, what do you think about it? Is that
This
fair?
becomes more evident now as our workforce is turning over.
That's
right?
a good
So
point.
now you talk about you're losing all these very mature technicians. Now you're bringing in younger technicians. And I think not that they're trying to just be very lackadaisical about things. They don't know. They don't know what's important and what's not, right? Something that was super important in the ambulance industry is the clock. You need people to be able to timestamp what they're doing, where they're at. They need to kind of know what time of day it is. So every single time we were done with a PM before it got returned to the ready line, we had to make sure simple things like the clock was set. So that way, you know, and that's one of those things. And that sets your standard for your quality assurance. If you're there making sure that the clock is working properly, that the windshield wipers are swiping clean, that means you're running a really great organization. If you're just throwing things back out in the ready line that has a tire pressure warning light on, do you really care about your customer? Do you really care about the quality of the work that you're doing?
I mean, you should be embarrassed if the vehicle goes out and then you get a pre-trip that says headlamps out. Like, that should kill you inside, you know? All the way up and down the organization, you know, from the fleet manager to the service writer, shop supervisor, whoever it may be. And you said, you made the point, well, who's doing it and all that. Again, I'm open. If your service writer has automotive experience, you know, which, again, back in the day, every service writer did. These days, maybe not. But if they do and they're qualified, yeah, I got no problem. It can be the service writer. Kind of depends on who it is. And again, doesn't have to be that 191, but it needs to be something substantive that's related to what your goals are. As you know, it could just be brakes and tires and headlamps, right, and wipers. Fine.
It's the entire system that you're working on, right? You could bring it in for a marker light that's out. Listen, check the entire lighting system. Make sure all the marker lights work, the turn signals, the headlights, high and low beam, brake lights. Don't just walk away from it. And at that same time, the technician, we talk about Steve's spaghetti trail all the time. He's going to at least make 2 swoops around the vehicle while he's looking at the lights. How is it, you know, how could he potentially not see a low tire, a tire that has a big gash in the sidewall or something like that? Problem is, you need to be crystal clear. And if you're going to be crystal clear with the technician, you have to have some sort of checklist so they can document, yep, this is what my expectations are. This is what I checked. And I think for something on an every work order type scenario, hey, you know, are they going to sit there and get a tire pressure gauge out and check each and every tire? No, but hey, tire condition. None of them appeared flat. And I think the trouble with that though is, and you're a subject matter expert, you know, in, you know, legal field or whatever, would that jam you up?
I now got a JD, everybody. Thank you, Claude.
Would that jam you up if you were brought in front of a judge or something like that, and you had an inspection, say, just for instance, you brought a truck in, you did one of these simple inspections. On that note, it said, do the tires appear to be pressurized?
It's a great question, but this is why the circumstance matter. Because in a DVIR, you do need to check the pressure, right? So if that's the expectation for that asset, then that's what you need to do. That's different than a light duty vehicle, right? So I will tell you this: if you didn't look at all, you lost that case. So you know, you have to figure out what's best for you guys. You know, if you look and you didn't check the pressure, but it appeared and there was a recent thing and it had the pressure, I think that would be fine in most cases. But I know for sure that if you didn't look, you're going to lose on that one, right? So, you know, we've seen it. You know, it's funny coming in from transportation, right? Because as a lot of the listeners will know, I got my start at coordinating maintenance. But then right after that, I went into driver curricula. I literally developed safety driver programs, and I leveraged existing ones like the National Safety Council, and then developed custom ones to teach 18 to 22-year-olds how to drive 15-passenger vans in New York City. It was tons of fun. But from coming from that background, right, and then falling more into the fleet management area, I do think it gives not only me, but others like me, a different perspective on what's important and why it's important. Because I was very, very involved with our legal department, with our insurance department, you know, kind of mitigating risk, right? Because inevitably something is going to happen, and you're involved with that. And the first thing they're going to do is what? What are the maintenance records, right? So So I think it's interesting. And look, here's what's coming. If those who know me well, they all know. Say, and I'm going to say, do the inspection and charge them for it. And then people are going to say, well, my customers don't want to pay for that extra work and all that other stuff. Figure it out. That's my answer. You can hire somebody the same way you got runners. You might hire someone this is all they do. They go around and they inspect the vehicles, teach them what you want them to look for, right?
Because no one goes to school for fleet management, chances are you were never formally trained on how to successfully lead a fleet. That's where the Fleet Success Playbook comes in. The Fleet Success Playbook is your guide to building a safe, reliable, and efficient fleet that provides exceptional service. Learn all about the 4 pillars of fleet success: stakeholder satisfaction, intentional culture, resource efficiency, and risk management. Get nearly 100 years of combined advice on common challenges, practical solutions, actionable tips, and real examples from fleet industry experts who have been there and done that. Visit www.fleetsuccessplaybook.com to request your free copy today.
I think it's interesting that any of the people in our chat group said no to an inspection, because what's one of the first things that you want to, or the blame you want to put on somebody when something comes in and it wasn't noted? Oh, didn't the driver do a daily driver inspection? Well, why are you going to put so much pressure on the driver to do what's required of them because they're a professional driver, yet you're not going to require your technicians to do the same thing?
Exactly, because our instinct is to be worried about that build to work order, right? And that's why I kind of beefed up. Now, in fairness to folks, once we talked about it a little bit and they understood, well, I'm not saying every time if it came in for a dome light, do you need to do a PMA inspection? But there should be something, right? Like I just feel like that's part of it. And I know that might create other issues and other challenges that you have to overcome. And yet I think that's good stewardship. That's extreme ownership. Good stewardship, excuse me.
Yeah. But it's a quick walk around. I mean, like you said, we're going to tier this down, from your maximum inspection, that 191 points. You've been using that number as a reference. And then you're going to say, hey, what are the critical things that we need to check when it comes in?
Correct.
And just really do that bare minimum.
Well, again, the bare minimum within reason of what those critical things. I want to be careful how we say that, right? It's not that we're doing the bare minimum. It's that we're doing what's necessary, but only what's necessary. You know what I mean? So I think that's key. I think, and again, taking a peek at the the pads and the calipers is where a trained mechanic is going to be able to look at it and immediately see, hey, I need to measure that. It's light, or there's something wrong, or there's rust, or there's whatever. Where maybe the average driver, especially in the light duty world, that's the thing too. A truck driver who drives Class 8s and Class 9s has a different level of training and understanding of automotive technology than, your average motor pool driver on your light duty sedan or like, that's key here. That's part of what I'm saying, right? Like part of it is that DVIR maybe doesn't exist or is of a different maybe it's your policy. We had a policy that even our light duties had to do pre and posts, but the expectation was very, very different to the quality of that check, right? And so that's what I'm saying. Like, align it, manage it with, what's appropriate for that scenario, if that makes sense.
And I mean, what we're talking about here is we're talking about like 1/10 or 2/10 or something like that. We're not talking about, and really to take a slow walk where you can really focus on every outside piece of the vehicle during a walk around. It doesn't take you about a couple of seconds. And I think when we're breaking it down to what's exactly necessary, calipers and pads and stuff like that aren't going to fit in there, right? We're looking for a tire that's flat, lug nuts that are missing, and maybe you could even put some notations in there, because obviously we know if the wheel all of a sudden is covered with a ton of rust, okay, there's probably an issue with a brake pad because the rust just doesn't get there on its own,
Exactly.
So, but I think you have to build those key indicators in the checklist as well.
Right. And you can train people for that. And by the way, man, leverage your FMIS. Well, when did this thing get its last? It may not be here for a PMA. Maybe it's not due, but when did it have last? If it's 1,000 miles away, no one's looked at it, you might treat that differently than one that was in the shop a few weeks ago. You know what I mean? Like, that's also very important.
And if your PM on-time performance is very high, and this is what a PM is based on and why it's, your efficiency in the shop is so high, if your PM on-time performance is high, is because you're seeing the vehicle and you're repairing these things all the time. So this inspection really It takes no time at all.
And if it's low and you're not seeing it, that's all the more reason to do it. I think the way I like to think of it is, and I don't mean to be, biased or anything like that here. Everyone's different. So I'm going to use my exact use case, right? My mom and my wife, both, they happen to be folks who they could care less. I've tried to teach them, hey, go look at this before you go on. And my wife's picked it up pretty good. My mom, not so much. Love her, But so when I go to take care of my mom's car, whether I'm doing it myself or I'm bringing it to the shop for her, or now I'm across the country. So she's, I'm on the phone with her. I'm on the phone with the shop because I know the shop. She brings it to, like I have a care for that vehicle because I know my mom's getting in it.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Or your kids are getting in it or whatever. Like, I think that's the level of stewardship that we in the fleet industry ought to have for these assets. And I think many do. And in fact, I think most do. But that's ultimately what's behind what I'm saying here. Like that's what I'm calling for. If that's not how you're looking at and treating the assets, then something's wrong. Especially, ironically, I think in fleets where they're under-resourced and they're not getting the funds for replacement and they don't have enough mechanics and they don't have a parts person and the fleet feels like it's falling apart, that's where I think is really hard. But you got to fight that natural tendency to throw your hands up and say, this is all a bunch of junk. Who cares, right? That's when you even more need to remember, man, my mom's getting in that car. Somebody's mom is getting in that car. Somebody's dad is getting in that car. Like, that's how we got to look at this.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the angle I'm thinking of here.
It was funny because that similar conversation came up this week. Do we save people's lives as fleet managers? And everybody thought about it for a second and it got real quiet. And I was like, yeah, we do, right? Because if you're not doing these type of inspections and you're not holding a high standard to the repairs and the preventive maintenance and the quality of the vehicles that you put on the road, it could very easily throw a tire off and go smash into a car that's beside it, cause some type of mass casualty wreck on the highway. So when it comes down to it, yeah, we're saving people's lives every single day with the decisions that we make and with the technicians that we hire and the training plans that we put in place. I mean, fleet managers hold a lot of responsibility on their shoulders day in and day out.
I couldn't agree with you more. I won't retell it, but there are episodes where Steve tells the story of, there was a big accident and someone got hurt and he got pulled in and he had to can a regional fleet manager because there was a mistake done. And, it's straight to that point. We'll have him on. We'll have him tell it again. Maybe the folks editing could put a link to that. But I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I can't tell you. I know several fleets, and I'm not saying this is right or wrong. I'm not sure. And they certainly should never have to do this. But I know folks who go out with tow trucks and keys and will literally go grab vehicles that are late for PMs and bring them into the shop. People come out and their car's gone, right? It's kind of wild, right? But it comes from a place of such extreme care, to your point, that they believe they're saving that person's life.
Yeah.
Because if they don't ever get in for that PM, what could happen,
I think our friends in the government space have those issues with people just want to own these vehicles. They have poor motor pool programs. They don't have good spares and nobody wants to turn anything in. And then they're going and I talked to somebody the other day and they were talking about shutting off their fuel card. That's what they would do, shut people's fuel cards off. And I'm like, get out of here. That really happens? He was like, yeah, that's how we get the vehicle back is by shutting off their fuel card.
And you know what? It's this vicious cycle too, because what happens is I've gone and I've interviewed users and why don't you want to bring your vehicle? I don't want to bring my vehicle in because then it's gone for 3 weeks. And I'm like, what the heck? Why is it gone for 3 weeks? What's going on in fleet? And then you talk to the fleet guys and gals and they say, yeah, did they tell you that it's 4 months overdue for a PM and we got to do this to it and that to it? And then we're lucky the floor's not falling off. And it's like, oh, And so what you get is this vicious cycle of you don't want to by not bringing it in for the PM, you make it take longer to get back. So folks, please, if you're a user out there and you get your vehicles in, or even just your own vehicle, get your PMs done. Like,
right.
Do your PM, do it on time. I know life happens. All right, you're late, fine, a mile or two, whatever. Get the PMs done. It really does make everyone's life better. It makes your own experience better, and it saves you money in the long run.
One of the biggest things that puts a bad taste in a technician's mouth when it comes to making sure, or who they prioritize on PMs when the vehicle is there, is somebody that says, oh, I need my car by the end of the day. I need it by the end of the day. You know, you have your son or daughter's event after school that you're really trying to get to, but you say, hey man, this guy, I really promised him to have his car, and then he doesn't come and pick it up for 2 or 3 days. Now you watch that vehicle right down to the bottom of the list, and that thing never gets fixed. So it's a give and take relationship, but main thing is communicate, be there on time, be there when it's scheduled, and then, you know, you build this cohesive relationship between the stakeholder and the shop, and then, you know, things go smooth.
Yeah, and that's why I really love when folks either have a motor pool where they could use a loaner program, or they have some loaner vehicles, because that what you just described is the worst. Yeah, it's like, okay, so should I let this vehicle go out and this person might die, or do I tell them no and the rental car shop is closed? And you know, like that's never a good thing to say to a mechanic or a service writer. You know, like bring the vehicle, be on time, and the more you're on time, the less you'll have to worry about how long it takes.
That, I think, is the hard thing to really prove to the customer, is if you bring it to me on time and consistently on time, it won't be here that long, because we're going to make sure we're fixing everything when it's here, and then it goes out and comes back.
And by the way, when we have a repair to do, and we'll know it.
Right.
We'll be able to tell you, hey, when you bring it this time, we have it in our notes. We're pretty sure it's going to need new pads and new tires, right? You know,
we'll be able to forecast how long it's going to be there.
Exactly. You know, so that's really key. Hey man, this was an awesome talk. I appreciate you doing it with me. I know I'm passionate about it. I know I got fired up when I, you know, when I think, again, I think there was actually misunderstanding in the way you and I talked about the nature of the inspection. Once we got clarity there, well, then there was complete agreement, you know?
Right. And to wrap a little bit of this up, you know, I mean, the clarity is a big thing, whether it's on the inspection, whether it's what you're expecting of somebody, goes back to the SLAs. Now we're talking about that. I mean, you have to be clear, and you have to make sure you tell people exactly what you're looking for. So that way it happens in the amount of time that you're looking for it to get done too, right? You tell somebody to do an inspection, then you tell the next guy to do an inspection. They're looking at a totally different thing. But when you document the inspection out, you put exactly what you're going to go on there, key metrics, pictures, something like that.
You know, let us know if you want. We'll do another episode about what a good inspection looks like and those sorts of things. You know, absolutely. But this is a big piece of risk mitigation, and I just feel like, number one, you know, you should hold your vendors to high standards, and you should hold yourself to equal or greater standards than you hold your vendor. You know what I mean? And this is just an area where, to me, there's no room for wiggle. Again, I admit my biases, my background's in transportation. I just think if you're not looking at the vehicle, who the heck is? Yeah. You know, sort of a thing, right?
And you got to build the relationship with the vehicle.
You got to build, yeah. You should. That's you know. Oh, I know she's fine. You know, it's like, take a look at me anyway. Just like you're. Oh boy, that's good, right? Like, you know, if my wife buys a new dress, I already think she's beautiful. I don't care about the dress, but for her, the dress is important. I got to take a look at it. So even if I just saw that vehicle yesterday in a different dress, I still got to take a look at it. But with that, we're going to call it a show. Thanks, everybody. Let us know. Hopefully you liked the talk. Give us your opinions. What do you think about this topic? Do you agree with my opinion about there should always be an inspection? You know, what are the nuances that might be important to you? Let's chat it up in the comments. Send us an email at podcast@rtafleet.com. If you're interested in our software, please visit us at rtafleet.com or in our consulting, fleetconsulting.com. And with that, we will call it a day. Thanks so much, Drew.
It was great being on my first episode as a Fleet Success Manager. I'm going to have a real great time, and reach out to me anytime, rtafleet.com.
I love it, man. Thank you, brother. That's awesome. Take care.
We hope you enjoyed the show. If you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others. Post about it on LinkedIn or leave a review. Want to learn more about our fleet management software, Fleet 360? Check us out at rtafleet.com. If you want to learn more about having your fleet evaluated by our consulting team, go to fleetconsulting.com.